Good morning, everybody. It's 9 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, and it is time to start off on our group for Leslie Denny Fitness and our yoga class today. And I'm glad that you're joining us. Got some things to share with you, so come and meet me on the mat so that we can celebrate our beautiful morning. I don't know if it's beautiful where you are, but it sure is beautiful where I am right now. Make sure you have a strap today, as well as a block if you have that handy. Any oil that you like to use is really helpful. I like to use oils a lot. Yum. And this one's a really nice one too. So what I wanted to share with you is as things keep evolving, it was interesting. I had a lot of thought yesterday because at the local gym that I teach at, the classes are opening up next week, and it's all very like boom, boom, boom. You know, things are constantly changing. It's like I feel like we're lying in wait for this longest period of time, and then all of a sudden, boom, you know, things are changing, and you have to respond to decide whether you're going to teach at certain places. For me, or whether you're going to bypass, and then in the meantime, it seems like you made all these plans already because you weren't doing anything anyway, and so now you've got to shift things around. And it's been a very flexible life as of late. And I started thinking about change. I think about change a lot. A lot of our yoga philosophies talk about change and action and inaction. And that is probably the action and inaction is one of the most interesting topics in one of the passages of the Bhagavad Gita, one of our philosophies that we use when we teach yoga. And it was interesting because it was talking about how even with action, when you're doing something, that's action, but even inaction is an actionable decision. To do nothing says that you're doing something. You're doing nothing, even though it's motionless. And when I start to think about change, I really shifted my mind into thinking about how things, as they change, sometimes it's almost like you got into a rhythm of the life that you were living, that when things start to change, surprisingly enough, there may be some things that you miss. And I started thinking about that as I was redoing my schedule yesterday, and it was kind of like on the fly because I had quite a few different communications coming from different areas that I work, asking me if I was ready to go back to work at these locations. And then one primary yoga studio that I teach for, they completely had to shut down. And that was a huge change. They finished up classes and shut the doors permanently on August 31st. And then I thought about all of the things that we as a couple in our home kind of put into place for our lifestyle as we had moved into this almost like transition of businesses not really being open, not going out to dinner, not going to movies, not doing the little things that we've always done on weekends and throughout the week and whatnot. And how that had to be changing. And I was like looking at my schedule saying, well, wait a minute, you know, we play a lot of tennis every day now. And I need to make sure that I'm still accommodating that, but there are going to probably be days that I can't. And I have to give that up, which I don't want to, you know, disappoint the collective us, but I need to kind of pop things into place in order to get back to work again. And work will still be very thin. It's not like for what I do that there's going to be a lot of work to be done. So when I was looking at quotes, I ran across this one quote by Anatole France. And Anatole France was an author and philosopher, and he passed away in 1924, so he lived quite a while ago. But he won the Nobel Prize for Literature, which is no easy feat. And he is very, very, like, when you read anything by Anatole France, it's very deep, and you need to sit and think about it a little bit. So I noodled on this phrase that I want to share with you today. All changes, even the most longed for, have their melancholy. For what we leave behind us is a part of ourselves. We must die to one life before we can enter into another. And I thought about the melancholy that I felt when the first transition happened, when all of a sudden in March, we're being pretty much shut down. And it seemed like, I remember going to the last cycle class, and I attended a friend of mine's cycle class for fun, and there was like hardly anybody in there, and it was right before all of the gyms closed. And we're all spaced apart, acknowledging each other's space, but it was such an odd experience. And then all of a sudden, everything shut down. And all I remember is we're running around looking for toilet paper, right? And then all of a sudden, I was missing not seeing people regularly. I was missing our plans that we normally would take. I was missing taking our little vacations. And as things started to transition, I had this huge melancholy about the way life was. And I began sitting back going, will it ever be the same? And then all of a sudden we fell into a rhythm. We're used to being at home most of the time. We're getting a vegetable box delivered every Friday. So that was part of our new rhythm. Doing just a weekly trip to the store with our face masks on, getting used to waiting in line to go into a store, having small chats with the people around us became a new rhythm. And then we got into our new rhythm of lifestyle around here. You know, me keeping busy with other things, John doing his projects, then heading out to play tennis when we could, being very aware of keeping social distance. And it became this brand new rhythm of life. And we didn't resent it. And it allowed us to move away from the melancholy of what we felt about what we missed. And then all of a sudden it felt like it became too long. And I started missing friends again. So I had to pull into rhythm different things. We're being on Zoom with my friends and touching base with them and trying to stay connected with family through using Zoom and FaceTime and whatnot, so that it gave me that fulfillment. And then the melancholy went away because it was a new rhythm. And now, as things are starting to open up, and I was actually driving my way down the street by where we live, and I was going into the center to go to Sprouts because I wanted to go pick up some tomatoes and vitamins. And as I'm pulling in on the big marquee for all the stores that were there, it says now open, now open, now open, now open, even down to the Regal Cinemas with a big sign that says now open. And I was like, they're all open? And a melancholy filled me. Funnily enough, the change that we had adapted into with our lifestyle, I all of a sudden had a little melancholy that it took so much work to find a way of being amidst a pandemic where nothing was basically open and there was no being able to gather together with other people, that all of a sudden I was like, what will I miss from what we just had to work so hard to build in a new rhythm of life? And of course, then as the day wears on and I start to work into the new day, I start to focus on the future and the changes that are unfolding now, so it lessens the melancholy to what I'm leaving behind. And that is the rhythms of what happened to us when change occurs. And it's almost like an acceptance that we have to endure a little bit of pain, a little bit of loss, a little bit of sorrow for every change that opens back up. And that's just not easy to do. For some people, we'll lock ourselves into that like the way it was. And it's like, well, I don't want to leave that, and I'm so miserable, and what will I do now? And yet, if we open the doorway and say, I accept this melancholy, this little bit of loss for what's going to change and what I will lose, because then I know that the next thing that's coming is going to be just fine. And that's what I did for myself. I know that I'm going to have to do some reshifting and reorganizing, and there will be some things that I need to let go. And one of the things that I will be letting go is this monumental amount of time in my space where I'm not connecting with others, but I'm basically immersed in the quiet of my home lifestyle. That doesn't mean that it's going to turn into fury and chaos. It just means that it's going to be a little more active. And those recognitions of being able to accept a little bit of change and also accept a little melancholy are the things that happen with our practice. I know that the first time that I realized that I could no longer go into what used to be very easy, deep back bends for me. I used to be a very, very flexible person throughout most of my life. And then all of a sudden, through some injuries and changes and things that had occurred, I realized that I couldn't do certain things in my practice anymore. And believe me, there was a melancholy there. It made me feel my age. It also made me feel of some probably bad decisions that I made about what to do with my body when I was in athletics. And when I had to endure that melancholy, I began to find these new changes in my practice that helped me find things that I was meant to find. A lot more meditation, a lot more peace, and a beauty in the moment of where I was at. So when you work through your practice, there may be occasional melancholies of things that you miss, but don't let that inhibit you, because acceptance of that melancholy opens the doorway to realizing that there will always be a little piece of you left behind in that space and time, but then there's a new piece of you being given to what is unfolding before you. And that is the beauty of change. So let's come to a comfortable seated posture. If you're using an oil, go ahead and put some oil on. And just take a few deep breaths. And maybe let your mind wander just a little bit. Think about where life was at yesterday and where it's at today. Maybe where life was at a few months ago and where it's at today. And reflect upon even those moments of melancholy, sadness, that certain things aren't the same, but find an acceptance that you gave a little bit of yourself to make those things happen. And in the space that you're holding, just begin to take a few focused breaths and begin to repeat in your mind this mantra, Soham. As you're inhaling, so, and as you exhale, hum. Soham. Soham. I am. I am. And just keep holding that mantra in your mind. Just keep repeating it in your mind. Throughout your breath pattern today, for every inhale in your mind, if you can, remind yourself of the word so. And for every exhale, remind yourself of the word hum. It means in Sanskrit, I am. It is a declaration of our presence in the space that we're holding right in this moment. So let's come to our hands and knees and begin cat-cow flow. If you're playing a little music, go ahead and turn that up. And inhaling, so, hum. And then on the hum, go ahead and slide your weight back to your child's pose. Stretch the arms out and we'll work through a few modified flows. So remember here we're going to move into Cobra or Bhujangasana. Inhaling, bring it forward to your kneeling plank. Exhaling, lower the chest and inhale into Cobra. Exhale, press back to Balasana, your child's pose. Then just keep flowing through that movement. Check into what feels right to you. And just move through perhaps two more. And then in the last one that you move through, go ahead and move back to your child's pose and just hold there. Then rise up to an upright kneeling posture and just move into a very small, short variation of Ustrasana. Hands towards the hips, open up through the chest. And then as you bring the back to neutral, go ahead and step left foot forward, right foot back, and reach the arms up. Then as you release the hands to the mat, do your rolling flow for hip flexors and hamstrings. Inhaling, rock it back. Exhale, roll it forward. And just do that a few more times. Good, and then step back to that kneeling posture. Once again, move into that variation of Ustrasana. Open up through the chest. And then as you release from there, stepping the right foot forward and move into that kneeling lunge. Then with the release of the hands to the mat and moving into that rolling stretch from hamstrings to hip flexors. Good. And then as you release from there, step back to your hands and knees and begin your cat-cow flow. So we're doing a lot of dynamic, movement to try to warm your body up. We're going to be going into a revolve standing big toe today. So it's a good idea to have your strap handy just in case there's that when you extend your leg out, you can't reach your toe. And always remember that if you choose, just move against the wall to give yourself a little bit of support to find these poses. You can always back away from the wall about an inch or so to be able to find it. Good, and then release back to your child's pose and go ahead and lift up into downward facing dog. Give a little bit of work from heel to heel. Then if you choose, either work a modified flow or full chaturanga flow from high plank to upward dog. Then step or jump your way to the top of the mat, rounding the back, slowly roll up. Good. Let's go ahead and take the feet very close together so that we move into a chair twist. Hands at the heart center and sink those hips down and back. And then take a deep inhale, and when you turn into the pose, just turn right into the left and bring that right elbow outside that left knee. Then as you release, rise back up to your standing pose, keeping those feet nice and tight together. Take a deep inhale and blow the air out. Then draw the hands at heart, sink into that chair pose, and then work to the opposite direction. And then release into a forward fold. Try to grab onto your toes and then reach out through the crown of your head and move right into that deep stretch for the hamstrings. So we did a little bit to start in our stretch of a dynamic movement, but now we're going deeper into that stretch. Good, and then drop the hands to the mat, step back to downward facing dog. Work a flow. And then press back to your downward facing dog, but lift that right leg up and open up through the hip. And sweep the foot forward, rise up to your high lunge. And just give yourself that little opportunity to adjust. If you need to drop that back knee down to the mat, you're welcome to it. And if you need to kind of hang on to that front leg to start with as you're finding yourself, that's fine. Now, as your right foot is forward, go ahead and bring that right arm behind your back and reach with that left arm. Just keep extending, and anytime you need to modify, feel free to do so. We're going to drop that hand to the outside of that right foot. And then just roll open that right shoulder. Let's take one more breath here. And then slowly rise back up to your high lunge. With a release of the hands to the mat, step back to your plank, knees or toes, and work a flow. Then press back to your downward facing dog. Inhaling, lifting up through that left leg and bringing it forward to your high lunge. Just giving yourself a moment to be able to adjust. Then go ahead and sweep that left arm behind your back and reach through that right arm. Anchor yourself into that mat and then draw that hand to the outside of that forward foot. Then slowly roll open that left shoulder. Relax through your jawline. And then with the next inhale, rise up into your high lunge. Then with the release of the hands to the mat, step back to your plank. Work a flow. If you choose, then push back to your downward facing dog. Step or jump to the top of the mat, rounding the back, slowly roll up. Inhaling, reach the arms up, exhale into your chair. Then on the inhale, sweep the arms up, exhale into your forward fold. Inhale to flat back. Exhale to your downward facing dog. Work through a flow if you choose. And then press back to downward facing dog. Bring it forward to your plank and take that left hand to the center and just pivot to your side plank. Then take your side plank in any variation that you choose. If you want to step that top leg in and forward and anchor that foot as you reach the opposite arm up, just stretch out through that chest. And then release and shift back to your plank. Take a cycle of breath. So hum. And then take that right hand to the center. Pivot to that side plank. Any variation you choose. I'm just offering up stepping that top foot forward and then trying to pull that lower hip away from the floor a little bit. Sometimes we sink into that hip and try pull it up and away and engage your core. And then release, pivot to that plank, and then lower down to the forearms. Hold here, or if you choose, start to walk those feet in, pike up through the hips.
This is a great opportunity for anybody who's into the headstand big inversions. And at any time that you need to, you can retreat back to your either dolphin plank, or you can move right into your child's pose, whichever you choose. Keep relaxing through the jaw. Notice where the power is in your body to be able to sustain the posture. A lot of it's in your mind. And then release to child's pose. Just set the hips back, reach the arms out in front, and then walk the hands over to the right. And just stretch into that left side. And then start to walk the hands to the opposite direction and just give yourself that deep stretch. Good. And then come back to your hands and knees and work through your cat-cow flow. Then rise up to the upright kneeling posture. Remember, if you need to cushion your knees, grab a little towel or blanket or even double your mat. You can always pick up the mat and double it out. So when we move into Ustrasana, this is the portion that you can go into the deep back bend if you choose. Curling your toes under will raise the heels somewhat, and you can take the hands to the tops of the hips, close to the spine, open up through the chest, or bring the hands towards the heels. Remember, it's a thoracic back bend. In other words, we're trying to open up through the chest and not crash into that low spine. So if you're feeling your hips jutting forward, a little pinching in the low back, that means that you're taking the back bend into the low lordotic curve of the spine. You want to keep it in the upper part of your chest. So you're almost lifting the chest out and up. Good, and then slowly release to a neutral spine. Just come into that upright kneeling posture. Check in with your back. If you feel discomfort in that low part of your back, next time you move into the pose, just make sure you're realigning a little bit more. I can give you a tip next time we meet about doing Ustrasana. So let's drop down to the hands and knees. Inhale, slope the back in. Exhale, arch it out. So hum. I am. And then release back to your child's pose. Take a deep breath. On the next inhale, find your downward dog. Work a flow if you choose. And then bring your way to the top of the mat, rounding the back and rolling up. I'm just having a lot of trouble with my mic and all of my wires today, so excuse me while I make 5,000 little readjustments today. All right. Okay, so revolve standing big toe is actually one of my favorite poses to move into. And the beauty in the posture is to make sure you're really stretching through your spine. So again, if you need to use the wall to support yourself, feel free to do so. You might want to use a strap.
if grabbing onto your toe and extending through the leg is a challenge for you, give yourself the support that you need. So as you anchor into your left foot, bring up that right leg and grab onto the toe, then extend the leg out. Then you're going to sweep that right arm up and around to move into the standing balance. Give yourself some time. And then slowly release when you're ready. Take a breath. Then in shifting it to the opposite direction, anchor into your right foot, grab the left toe, and extend the leg out. A little trickier for me on this side. And then sweep that left arm up and around. Good. And then when you're ready, release. Good job. Let's take a few deep breaths. Good. The next balance pose that we're going to move into is chair balance. And so as you're anchored into your left foot, crossing that right ankle over, just sink those hips down and back. Another great pose to do against the wall if you need to. To get the stretch, start to drop the hands down to a block or the floor and really lengthen out through that leg. And then lengthen to a flat back. So that's a little additional movement that we're doing today to incorporate a little deeper stretch. And then slowly find your way back to the balance. And then gently release. So that's a little trickier, and especially with that lengthening of the spine, it incorporates a lot deeper stretch. So let's swap to the opposite side. Right foot anchored, left leg over. Find the balance to begin with. And then slowly make your way to the mat. You can use a block here if you like. And then straighten through the leg and then lengthen through that flat back. And then as you sink back into that hip, slowly rise back up, hands to the heart. And then release to your standing posture. That was a lot of balance work today, and you did great. So let's come back down to the mat. Inhaling, reach the arms up. Exhale into your forward fold. Inhale to flat back. And exhaling back to your downward facing dog. Work a flow if you choose. Good. And then lunge the right foot to the top of the mat. We're going to go into a little deeper stretch here. So drop that left knee down and just roll on the heel to get into that stretch. And remember the power of your block. If you need to use a block to rest your hands on at any height, feel free, because we're going to go even deeper here if you choose. So once we find our way here, lengthen through that spine and then reach that right arm out and up into the twist.
And then with a release in the hands to the mat, go ahead and move right into the deepest runner's lunge. But we're going to drop that back. We keep that back knee dropped to the mat and just keep scooting your toes forward until you find the boundary of the stretch that you feel best with. If you like to go into splits, feel free to go right into splits. I'm a little too tight to take on that venture today, but I'm really feeling a great stretch in my hip flexors in the front of my left hip. So just find your way into the stretch that is best for you. Good. And then bring your weight back into your downward facing dog. Work a flow if you choose. And then once you've returned out of that flow, bringing up that left leg, lunge it forward, and then drop the right knee down. Start to stretch through that front leg, and then reach that left arm out and up. You've rolled up the toes on that left foot, so you're really rolling on the heel. And then as you release the hands down, go ahead and start scooting that left foot forward until you find the stretch that feels best to you. And I'm going to use my block here. And actually by lifting up my chest, I can work a little deeper into that stretch. And then just take a deep inhale, and on the exhale, just relax that hip open. Good. And then as you bring yourself out of the pose, let's go ahead and come to the hands and knees and work through cat-cow flow. Inhale to exhale. So hum. Good. And then go ahead and bring yourself to a seated posture on the mat. How are you feeling? Go ahead and put on a little bit more oil if you like. I know I am. I'm using something called Align today, and I'm not sure what's all in it, but it sure smells good. Good. Now let's draw the soles of our feet together and move into our inner thigh stretch, Baddha Konasana. And just keep lengthening through your spine as you stretch into it. And then layer into double pigeon. So when you're layering one leg on top of the other, it doesn't matter which one first because we'll do both. If this feels really restrictive to you, then move into this variation and just park those hands behind you for the stretch. So that can absolutely be a variation that you move into. If you're comfortable here, you want to stretch up through the spine and lean forward. And then release from there, and then switch it to the other side in either variation that feels good to you.
And sometimes I'll say it feels good to you, but sometimes it's almost like there's a little bit of a struggle that happens where we're resisting it and we feel like we're not getting anywhere with it. And sometimes moving into that place of just total inaction, just being in stillness, creates all the action in the world. Just like what it talked about in the Bhagavad Gita, that action can be, inaction. You can be choosing to do nothing, and that's very active state, to do nothing. Good. And then release from there, and then move right into your forward fold. And by all means, if you're using a strap, feel free to anchor that at the end of your feet and just stretch your way right into it. And be very aware, as you're repeating that mantra in your mind, the little things that begin to open up. Just with your time, your stillness, your connectivity. And then release from there. And let's go ahead and roll it to the back. And as you lie on your back, draw your knees to the chest and then just rock yourself from side to side just a little bit. And then hug that left knee into your chest as you stretch that right leg down. Take a couple of deep breaths, very cleansing pose. And then anchor the strap and extend the leg out. And then bring the leg out to the side. Just move into the range that is best for you. Remember what I was alluding to in the beginning of our class about my loss of back bends. Sometimes we'll see a change unfold in our bodies or our mind, or just something that's happening that we start to push back at. But what if we didn't push back and we found acceptance with wherever we were right in that moment? How would that feel? What would be lost and what would be gained? And then bring the leg up and cross it over, making any little adjustments that you need to, maybe using your block to rest that leg on. And remembering that mantra, I am so hum.
and then release from the pose. As you come to your back, just go ahead and, first, draw that right knee to your chest and stretch the left leg out. Notice your breaths, because when you take really deep breaths of this pose, it's incredibly cleansing for the digestive system. It stimulates your circulation. It's a great awareness pose. So sometimes if you're feeling a little sluggish in the afternoon, just moving into this posture, holding it for a few breaths on either side with some really intentional breathing can really get that circulation and oxygenation bubbled up. And then lengthen through that leg. And then when you're ready, bring the leg out to the side. And then when you're ready, bring the leg up and cross it over. Just move into that reclining twist. Take a few deep breaths. And then when you're ready, bring yourself into a quiet space on your mat. You may be distracted where you need to incorporate some additional pose or stretch just to relax your body. Feel free to do that. Otherwise, find a posture that is just really resonates with you and allows you to let go. And sometimes that posture may change from practice to practice. So really explore something that will feel great to you. And then bring yourself into that final inhale to exhale, really active breath, and let it slowly diminish to a very quiet, steady rhythm. All changes, even the ones that we long for most, have their melancholy, for what we leave behind us is a part of ourselves. We must die to one life before we can enter into another. It's dramatic, but the idea is that sometimes letting go is the greatest gift that we can give ourselves. It's not easy. But you have a few moments here in the heart of a otherwise distracting or busy day for you to let go. So keep letting go, and when it's time to come back, I'll come for you.
Take a deep breath and give yourself a little bit of stretch. Maybe move your fingers and toes. And gradually roll yourself over to one side. Then make your way back to an upright seated posture. Let's take a few cleansing breaths here. And let's draw our hands to the heart. When change occurs, so often, even if it's the most longed for change that we've wanted for our lives, there's a little bit of melancholy for what we've left behind, because a little piece of ourselves is left behind with where we were. But in order to invite change, we have to be able to let certain doors close. And that takes a lot of faith. And faith you can't see, you can't touch it, you can't feel it. But it's an act, knowing that where you're headed is exactly where you need to be. Lokaha, samistaha sukino bhavantu. May all beings everywhere be happy, free, and at peace. Namaste. Have a wonderful day, and thanks so much for joining us today. And I hope the rest of this day winds up being fabulous. Bye-bye now.